grow genetically modified foods and the toxic chemicals it takes to grow them. I work with a simple lunar template showing the 8 phases of the moon during each lunar month, from new moon to crescent. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell on this because the piece I had with the labels is gone. But if you imagine at the top of the figure is the new moon, when the sun and the moon are together, and that then the moon goes out away from the sun, and in the course of the lunar month comes all the way around and back again. That's a lunar cycle. So this is a lunar template, and it has 8 phases: new moon, crescent, first quarter, gibbous, full moon, disseminating, last quarter, and balsamic. I tell you that because the 8 points on this calendar, are also used to represent the seasonal cycle. So we can go back and put winter solstice at the top and summer solstice at the bottom. And in between we have Candlemas at the crescent point, and at the first quarter, spring equinox, and at the next point, Beltane, then summer solstice, and so on, all the way back. And this was used everywhere. So it's the same 8-point template, demonstrating the monthly oscillation from darkness to light and back again, that is overlain on the yearly cycle. Okay. It's this simple round calendar that is and has been used for thousands of years to depict reality. Lipinski Vir is the oldest Neolithic site in Europe, agricultural site, that means. Yeah, not quite, I guess. Built on the edge of the Danube River. Its original design reflects this 8-point calendar cycle. So this is from the 9th millennium BCE, 11,000 years ago. And this is according to a recent archaeology book published by the museum in Belgrade. When I visited the site in 2004, an old man from the village brought to our group of scholars, very random, a loaf of bread in the shape of the mandala. He said it had to do with death rituals, but I mean, they just baked it at the bakery. In Peru, this 8-point mandala is called the Inca cross. We can go ahead, And it can be observed everywhere, even in the layout of Machu Picchu, the famous site in the mountains. And the women who live high in the Andes around that area wear the mandala on their hats. All different ones in different regions. The same shape in Nepal, I think we have that, denotes the grandmother goddess Ajima. And in Tibet forms the core of Vajrayana Tantric Buddhism, where it's used to invoke the goddesses of the 4 cardinal directions and the center. I mean, these are just a few examples. Finally, I show my students, by calculating their personal astrology charts, that each of us is born under one of these 8 lunar phases. It's actually the sun-moon relationship, not just the lunar phase. Bringing what may seem like an abstract teaching home and making it personal, as I imagine it is and always has been for indigenous people. Each of us is anchored here on the planet by being born in an exact time and place. And this imprint can be experienced in us as qualities defined by one of these lunar phases. So let's go back to the beginning of human evolution, to a time when we were branching off from our 2 closest primate relatives, the chimpanzees and the bonobos. Science tells us we share all but about 2% of their DNA, yet with such a small genetic difference between our species, we behave quite differently in the world. And the chimps and bonobos also behave differently from each other. We humans, with our thinking minds, our spoken language, and our inventive eye-hand coordination, are the tool makers of the planet, for good or ill. And one of our most brilliant early inventions was the ability to track time and keep a calendar. Paleolithic annotations on bones and stone artifacts show the human menstrual cycle and the waxing and waning phases of the moon. In one case, on a bone inscribed with an image of a pregnant horse, someone has even kept notations of a mare's 11-month cycle. 11 months of pregnancy. Our cousins, the chimps and bonobos, still have estrus, which means the female comes into heat and shows a little blood when she's fertile and sexually receptive, and at that time they can reproduce. What lies behind the discovery of timekeeping and the invention of the calendar is the vacillating monthly menstrual cycle, rather miraculously synchronized with the moon, and the human female group's original cognition of this. I like to think of this cognitive process and lunar synchronization as representing the evolutionary leap to the human species. Healthy human adult females are fertile every month during ovulation, but without a show of blood. And when we bleed, like the dark moon, we are not normally fertile, a very distinct and noteworthy difference from the other primates. Goddess scholars believe that the earliest civilizations based their social organization and ritual cycles on this communal condition. The root word for ritual, in Sanskrit for instance, also means menstruation. In Greek, the word for menstruation is the word for moon, month, and mental. Earlier in Sumer, the original word for Sabbath, Sabbatu, marked the menstruation of the goddess Inanna. Gimbuddhist documents that birthing in Old Europe took place in the temples, along with the ritual baking of communal bread. In at least one place, that bread was baked in an oven shaped like a pregnant womb with an umbilicus as a chimney. I had a picture for you out of Gimbuddhist, I'm sorry, it's not here. The mystery of turning grain into bread through the oven's heat corresponded in a magical or metaphoric way with the mystery of turning the menstrual blood into nourishment for a growing child through the inner heat of the womb. This way of thinking and being is apparently as old as time itself and central to human physical and cultural evolution. The later detour into patriarchal social organization that began about 5,000 years ago with the first dynasties has spread like a virus around the world, but that does not make it natural. Matriarchy, beginning with the mother, is a concept with a biological basis in fact and reality. It names not only our evolutionary process, but how each individual life comes into the world. Patriarchy, beginning with the father, or father dominance, whichever way you want to read it, is contrived and artificial, requiring a huge infrastructure to maintain the lie. Jen Vaughn teaches that the gift is given to each of us through birth from our mothers, and that all women and men receive this same gift equally. The concept of not giving, which men learn to value and express in patriarchal society, has to be taught and learned because it is an overlay rather than being inherent or natural. Some of the most recent evidence from the studies of Taylor and other scientists thinking outside the box can be used to corroborate the theory that society was peaceful when it was matriarchal. In Neolithic Old Europe, for example, and that there are structural or biological bases for this peacefulness that can be demonstrated in the laboratory. To whatever extent we choose to bring women back into the center as autonomous agents and active leaders in our communities, to that extent, we will be working directly with peace on earth. This is not to deny that when exceptional individual women become like men in leadership positions within male-dominant groups, they tend to uphold the same values and practice similar behaviors as the men around them. I'm talking about something different, talking about, as many women have so far here today, talking about female collectivity and the hormonal influences that have potentially very powerful effects, although unseen and therefore normally unacknowledged.